All right, we are live. We're back. Policy and culture. We have a very, very special guest today. But before we go into introducing him and announcing who it is, as you all know, we like to intersect the pathways between policy and culture. We are obsessed with how policy works and the impact it has on our communities, but also how important and valuable our culture is. My name is Dan Lloyd, and my co-host is
Andrew Ayodiji.
And today, we're actually going to dive a bit into a Long Island native's journey and story. A very, very successful real estate developer that has changed the landscape of one of the most probably widely known hit TV shows communities that we all aware of. So as we jump into that, let's just give a warm welcome to our special guest today, Mr. Dan Bythewood of Cité Development, the co-founder and president. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the proper pronunciation of all of that.
You got to make sure we get it right. So as we mentioned, we like to talk about policy and culture. And we really, before we jump into your work right now and the expertise you have in real estate development, we do have to say you're a Long Island native.
Yes.
We're both from Long Island. So we like to learn a little bit about your journey, your story. So just take a step back a bit and tell us about how you got to the place where you are right now.
Sure. So my father was originally from Hempstead, mother from Boston, get married in D.C., moved back to Long Island and had a cool little family. There are three of us, the siblings. And, you know, I've always been someone that wanted to strive to do more. And my father was a very successful orthodontist. And part of my first drive into business was into the world of film and television. And I was both SAG and AFTRA by second grade. I do have to fix my IMDb because it's still spelled wrong. They put an L in my name. But The Doctors was the first place I actually really started to work really hard, where it was a soap opera called The Doctors. Alec Baldwin was on The Doctors, which is a funny story about Alec and I meeting each other, you know, decades later. I was like, remember the black kid? And he was like...
And he's a Long Island guy too, right? Alec Baldwin.
Mass speaker, right?
Yeah. And so I ran into him in East Hampton at Starbucks. I was like, remember when The Doctors? He called his wife over. He's like, listen to this. This guy's talking about The Doctor. And it was a really unique portion of time in my life because I was really young. In second grade, they would stop like I was like a celebrity inside of school at second grade. That's like, what is that?
What town did you grow up in? What town?
So I was Dix Hills and then moved to Upper Brookville.
Okay.
So that was our path on Long Island.
What schools did you attend?
Hills, Half Hollow Hills. So
Okay.
I did all
East or West? Come on.
We did the West. We did the West thing, man. We did.
That's
the
our
West.
backyard.
So, but yeah, I was a West kid, and then went to University of Pittsburgh, came back and finished at Adelphi. So I've lived in and around Long Island for forever, like place out, and then stayed Sag Harbor with my family. So, and that's like generational. My grandparents were one of the first in Sag Harbor in Azurest, in that community, like first 5 families that were there. But for me, it was like you have all these important people that are around you, and it's like, well, how do you become important? I would go to watch. I was like, wow, there are all these people that came to see you. Why did they come to see you? So it was trying to figure out how you become important, so people actually think that you're an important voice in not just your community, but kind of globally, that they want to learn how you did things.
Yeah.
So, you know, and in acting, I didn't figure that out. So for me, I just think I didn't, for whatever reason, partially, you know, acting in Hollywood is so fickle, right? It's all how you look. So we all look good now. We look good as a kid, but there's those teenage years where they just mess it up with hormones, and you just kind of don't. You're on TV, you're a lot bit awkward, so you get left behind.
In second grade, did you know that's what you wanted to do? What made you even think to get into acting?
So it was my parents.
Okay.
So part of my family, like Reggie Rock Bythewood or Gina Bythewood, so both of them big Hollywood. My brother's in Hollywood, writer, producers, but Reggie's mom put me into acting. And you're like, that was a really cute kid. They're like, this would be great to for you to be known as like an actor. So that was like really my start.
Okay.
Gary Coleman, I met once, and he was like, for a year, he called his mother. He's like, remember that black kid that you wanted to know that none of us knew? Because, right, there was no internet back in the 80s. So there was no way for us to actually find each other. It was really, it would just be a mistake that you ran into them. It was funny when we met each other. And he called his mom. He's like, remember that black kid that you wanted to know on the doctors? Well, here he is. Talk to him. So I talked to his mom. But for me, it was really not successful because I couldn't figure out how to bridge the rest to become a big actor. And it was probably the first start of the embrace of you didn't make it. You didn't make it in that. And I'm happy to talk about not making it. I just, for whatever reason, the universe was like, this is not your calling, Dan. And you need to go back to school and go learn something and figure it out, or try something else. And it's the trials that are so important, because I think that you don't learn anything if it's all super rosy and smooth. Like, what did you learn? You just kind of fell into success versus building success.
And I think that that's interesting that you speak on failures. Me and Dan speak about, failures a lot, just, from where we came from, trying to pursue a career in athletics that didn't work, getting a college education. What did that do to you? Because we talk about what it did for us, and it's just like a motivation that's like fueling everything. What did that loss, or just not you being accepted at that time, do to you to move forward?
There's a drive that you have to find in yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You could go one of two ways. Woe is me. I can't believe it didn't happen. Or, oh, you wanted to pretend that wasn't going to happen? Let me show you how I'm going to make that happen. Right? And that's the kind of person I am. It's just in me. I'm like, I took a no in that direction. I went from that, and then my next try was like really in racing cars. So I had racing licenses by the time I was 16, 17, like pro racing license, all that fun stuff. That was amazing. But once again, it came to money. It was like I couldn't figure out how to get either the sponsor dollars, and my family didn't know any oil families to put money into car racing. It just didn't work. So it was another failure for me. And I was like, okay, so I want to be successful. I'm never going to give up. Drive. As many doors that slammed in my face, and there are lots of them. I think that a lot of people think that we just shoot the moon coming out the gate. And if you do, kudos to you. Like you won lotto, right? You shot the moon first go. But that wasn't my drive and how I actually learned. It's we spend a lot of time in like chaos theory. In chaos, there's opportunity.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And the chaos is that you didn't make it.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you find that inner drive to make sure that it happens? And it's really important to tell people, because people look at my Instagram or they'll find articles on me like, oh my God, this is amazing. This did not happen overnight. The gray hairs didn't show up overnight. It took decades of time. And, part of it was finding someone that was very similar to me. And my partner's name is Ian. And we just push each other. It's the funniest thing, because you would think we were adversarial, and it's not. It's almost like athletics. You put Michael Jordan with a Scottie Pippen. It's like, well, I'm going to do this better than you. And then Scotty's like, well, I'm going to do this better than you.
He's
Mike's
still
like,
saying it to this day. Hey, come on, Scotty. You know he wasn't better than MJ. He still got a chip on his shoulder.
It's so true.
Yeah.
But, you need that person to help.
Yeah.
And I remember when we started in real estate. So for everyone, I'm a real estate developer, as you were saying. And Ian and I started at New York Equity Fund. Ian hired me, and it was the first time that it was a real desk-based job, one based on you needed to understand math, you needed to understand how culture actually changes, because now you're touching people, which means the culture of how they function internally, right? There's a Chinatown, which is very different than there is a Harlem, that is very different than Brooklyn, right? All of that is, and then right everywhere across the country and across the world has a culture.
Exactly.
So you started to learn, well, what was it like? And it wasn't culture just right now, it was culture for the past like 50 years, because that segment that the kids that we talked to, their parents lived in a different time. So, right, if you were up in Harlem, you dealt with crack epidemic, or kind of, you name all of these items that happened inside of that neighborhood. So you kind of had to be sensitive. So it's learning how to really touch people. And that was where I actually found my home, right? And that's what I turned into, is this really interesting real estate developer who wanted to find a purpose at the end of the day. And that's what I did. I found a purpose. Like, how can I be helpful? How can I be helpful to society? Especially in Black neighborhoods. As you guys know, typically when you hear developer, it's a large white development company in Black neighborhoods, and they're like, oh, it's going to be terrible. So I was like, well, how could we effectively change that to be a positive for people? And I learned it was interesting that even inside of being successful doing it, not everyone likes you. Even when you think you're bringing everything to the table for them, and you are, and they're like, but if they're not part of this humongous gravy train, or as much as they thought they should be a part of, you're not their friend. So it's interesting to see how even being more helpful than most people have been ever in certain neighborhoods and certain cultures, you're not the answer.
See, Dan is being humble right now, and we like, when we doing policy and culture, we like to break it down so our audience understands. He just said he's one of the biggest real estate developers, so we're gonna break it down for our audience. The HBO show The Wire that we all watch, Avon Barksdale, Marlo, Snoop, Chris, he brought that whole thing and revitalized that whole entire neighborhood. Dan did that. The Wire, the HBO special that we like. So he's not a little developer. It's not none of that. So Dan, let's get into more of that. Let's talk about that. That's what people want to hear as well too.
Yeah, man. So if you look at the neighborhood that we're talking about is Poppleton in Baltimore. So Poppleton is a neighborhood that had Lexington Terrace high rise, which were two really large Hope 6, which came out of like the 50s and 60s of government policy, which everyone knows Hope 6.
Ever was this though? Is this not necessarily when you came in to start developing, but when you say this happened, is this late 70s, early 80s?
So it was even before that. So it really stems back to the 50s where it starts to slide.
Really, that far back?
Yeah, and then it starts to slide, and then you see the first urban renewal plan in Poppleton come up in 75. I was born in 1974, so I was 1 year old. Okay. So it's funny when people are like, oh, Dan did something. I was like, I was one. I don't know the kid in Pampers that was the real estate developer, but that wasn't me. But you know, it's 1975 was the first urban renewal ordinance that was passed, which is a law where the city's allowed to really start to take properties and then help to reposition. So we didn't show up till 2006. But even through all of that time, the city still didn't own all it actually to today still doesn't own all the property, which is crazy if you think about it. It's a really long period of time. But like these cities that go through these periods, you need tax revenue. So now if everything in like Poppleton was worth $1,000 maybe on a good day, like there is no, what tax revenue are you getting off of that? So they don't have any money to police it because you can't hire somebody on $1,000. Even if you have 1,000 units, it's like, that's no revenue for a city. You can't redo the streets. And I think that this is a lot of our communities where, and I told people, I was like, don't give things like on a buddy pass to your friends. If you want to do that, sell it to them, give them back all the money because it'll keep your house value where your house value is, right? When you look at real estate, it's based on appraisal. Appraisals are based on the last trades that happened in that neighborhood. If you give it to your cousin for $1,000, guess what the last trade is? You just made everyone's property worth $1,000.
Yeah, that's nice.
Mental, like, oh, are you kidding?
Yeah.
You can't do that. So it's really trying to help educate people also. So this neighborhood, everything's worth $1,000.
So in a lot of areas before urban renewal, there was a thriving middle class. So even on Long Island, Detroit, a lot of 100%. Predominantly African-American communities. Was that the same thing in Poppleton? Really?
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Same thing. They had a whole, but it's when you look at Maryland, it's south of the Mason-Dixon line. So we're really talking about the South. But it's an interesting part of the South because the way it was described to me was this is the last state in slavery for you to be free or if you get caught, it's the first state back. So there's a historically weird portion about Baltimore and Maryland as a state when you look back at how we were treated coming in and out of slavery, and things like that still exist. So people are very, very specific on where you live. So if you look at Baltimore, they talk about it. They're like, all right, Dan, so to understand this, it's the white L and the black butterfly. I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, so if you look at this map, you see this middle, that's the middle, that portion is the white L, which is the body of the butterfly. I was like, oh, I could see that on the map. And it's like, you see all this? These are the wings. So the white people all live in the white L and the black people all live in the butterfly wings. And that's where they pushed all the Section 8. And that's where you start to end up with things that are very, very difficult, because now all the development happens in the safe zone, which is where the majority of policing happens, where it's deemed to be safe, where you can walk around at night. And the black L, it's like back to the wire. So bringing you back circle to the wire, we've punched a hole in the black butterfly wing, which is what we really want to do to help have black people even see, like, hey, look, we've changed this neighborhood so that even you who's now upwardly mobile, you make six figures, you can live in this neighborhood. It's not the same one of where the wire came from, where you had to run, where it was heavy, heavy murder, heavy crime. Like we've dropped crime and violence by over 50%, just in what we've done. Then the housing authority comes in and then they're demolishing all the rest of their low income development and making it a middle income. So, you know, the hard part is somebody has to be first. Everyone wants to be second. Everyone wants to be second because you've done the hard part. Being first is really the difficult part. So as you guys think about it, if it would be great hindsight, right? If I was, or we were all collectively this age and Harlem was turning, it's like, we would have bought all of Harlem. Dollar program. Yep. Buy everything you can. How much money you have in the bank? We're going to buy all of Harlem. Right. And then you would be worth tens of billions of dollars today. Right. So, but to be the first dude who goes in, it's really difficult. So, and it takes decades. It's not, and decades of you paying taxes. And it's not as if this is all so smooth. You know, you have community opposition. You're like, but I've done the most amazing. I've raised your house value from $1,000 to $275,000. You didn't even paint the shutters. Yeah. And they still have problems with you.
That's something else I wanted to speak to you about. Like even on The Wire, because it was like a few episodes of them coming in, like revitalizing the community. And it was like a few older women I was there, like in their 80s. They did not want to leave. They was coming them, offering them cash, putting them in new buildings and stuff. They did not want to leave the house. How was that like navigating the community out there to try to like pitch this new idea to something that was going on in there for like a lifetime?
Yeah, you know, our neighborhood was so decimated that a lot of people really were happy to leave. It was so decimated, they tattooed RIP and put people's name on the buildings. It was everywhere. It was so people wanted to leave because they were leaving a bad chapter, whether it was your uncle, your brother, your sister. A lot of people were happy to leave that neighborhood to start over. So the city paid them, right? So eminent domain, if that's used, or threat of eminent domain, it's not like when it happened in the Bronx and they just knocked on your door and like, get out.
It's like Robert Moses era, right?
Yeah, that's a very different era of eminent domain.
Yeah.
Eminent domain, you get 3 appraisals. You get the higher of 3 appraisals. You complain a little bit about that. You get 10% above the highest of 3 appraisals. And the appraisals are like real appraisals done by the city. And you can contest, but there's a whole real process that exists for that. So it's really interesting to see how it all works these days. But it shouldn't be something, I know really wealthy white developers that have also lost to eminent domain, right? This isn't just like I think in our culture that we just don't see it, but in Boston when they did the Big Dig, really large Greek family that I know, big real estate developer, they absolutely lost property to the Big Dig, but they got paid for it, right? At the end of the day, Would it be worth a lot more today? Yes. However, it's part of the process to make it all better.
Yeah. So to kind of stick on the wire before we go on, because you have a lot of developments in a lot of different areas, but I'm very curious because again, it's policy and culture.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit about the culture, not only of the show, but of the community in Baltimore and that area. One big part of that show is the politics.
Yeah.
The lot that was going on in that. So as a developer coming to the area, talk a bit about the political strategies you have to go through just to navigate and actually get a shovel in the ground. How does that work?
So the politics, and I think this is true in any community, right? You need to have buy-in on multiple levels, right? So you need the community, like whether it's a community board or a community in large that helps to advise the not-for-profits that are then controlling. So you start kind of grassroots, because kind of you do need the mayor, but if the people that select him as mayor are not really for it,
he's not going to go for it.
He can't. Right, or your councilman, right?
Yeah.
They're running a popularity contest, so everyone has to work together. And when I spoke to like the mayor, council president, councilman. Or actually, she was a councilwoman. Her name was Inez. So it was just a whole bunch of people that were there that you needed to talk to at first. And then you needed all of the people in the community. So we actually showed up with 500 letters of support from the community. We joint ventured with a local not-for-profit, which was Poppleton Village CDC at the time, which was really, really interesting to drive that. Because they, coming out of like Bill Clinton era politics, they gave $100 million to the Poppleton neighborhood to demolish the towers and start revitalization. This was Bill Clinton. This was still before we showed up.
Wow.
So it takes decades to make all of this happen. It's unfortunately not like just snap your thumbs together and there you go.
Yeah.
This is, just hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars when you're talking at this size, because if you only brought $10 million, which is still a lot of money, your impact is so small. Like you would never be able to just demo the towers with just the 10 million. Then you have to build things. Then you look at Baltimore being a historically old city. Their infrastructure is atrocious. Like their water, sewer, stormwater, fire water,
everything.
Everything. Yeah. So, and it's old, right? So pipes, when you put it in, it's like this big. Oops, sorry. Like this big is the pipe, right? Then as sediment fills, it shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And now you have no water pressure to go up. So the water pressure in the neighborhood couldn't get above really like the second story. So now you have to buy pumping stations to help pump water up. Because if there's a fire on the 7th story, you can't hear, oh, we don't have water pressure.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. So, there's so much that goes into the community and educating them. So we brought them into architect meetings. We're like, hey, so you guys can understand, we want you to learn how this really works. Architect and engineering meetings. We brought them into city council meetings. And the unfortunate part is a lot of those people end up leaving because they're like, this is great, Dan, you've done what you're supposed to. My now $1,000 house is now worth $275, and I'm gonna go retire to North Carolina. I'm selling.
Yeah, wow.
Right. So, but now technically the investment that you made or didn't make, right? Your grandparents gave you this house and you didn't even do anything, has now fulfilled its goal of why in America they say, right, the middle class, biggest middle class in the world, grows up around home ownership. Here's your home ownership. And it's not about having the home, it's about this is worth money. So now you could sell that for money, go someplace else and make more money from that money. So it's a whole structure that you should really be looking at as a homeowner and someone in our community, that you're looking to make money. It's not like just holding on to it. We're not a bunch of sparrows that just built a little nest, right? We're trying to make money. It is an investment. And even if you don't sell it, you're making money because you're like, okay, I will refinance it, take the money out, put that money in Google, right? Make a whole lot more money on that. And, right, you can do things. Money kind of begets money. So if you understand how the cycle should work to make money, you can actually do amazing things. So now, rates are coming back down. We're super excited and looking forward to the Fed hopefully lowering the rate significant.
You think we'll get to 5%?
Yeah, I think it
so.
will.
Yeah.
I think it will. I think the Feds need to help to jumpstart, like even for your generation. So when my parents bought their first house, this is crazy. They bought it for $79,000. Where do you can't touch a condo for $79,000. So your generation right now has to make, let's say, 4x to 5x that to buy just a condo. Then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I just had kids. And you're like, wow, so all the Ivy League schools are $50,000 a semester, or regular schools are $40,000. The amount of money you have to generate is enormous. So our community really needs to look at how we drive to make things cash flow positive quickly, because everything depreciates so fast that you have to find ways to not get caught in the policy of other people's policy. The reason why I say that is because I was looking at this deal in Miami, and it was a black beach in Miami. And
When you say Black Beach, what do you mean by that?
so, during the time, we weren't allowed to go to white beaches.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So hence the reason why Azure Rest and in Sag Harbor, Azure Rest and Nineveh and Sag Harbor Hills, those were the black beaches where we were allowed to swim, and we weren't allowed to go to other beaches. So, so there was this black beach in Miami. And I understand why they put them there. It was really kind of tumultuous, the way the water came between the islands. So it was very dangerous to swim, but it was still on the water. And someone talked the black people who controlled it under a not-for-profit to put it into national parkland. I was like, you're never going to get it out. I was like, you just probably blew like $4 billion of revenue.
My goodness.
And that's what I mean by not getting caught in other people's policies. Like, this isn't great that you put this into things that you can't generate revenue. So now, yes, it's going to be preserved, but anyone could have put a plaque there.
Yeah.
Anyone could have put a plaque there. Anyone could have done so much more than just having historically, trees and a waterway where you see like the hammerhead sharks swim by, because you really wanted to make money, and you could have helped a whole community with that kind of money. It's like, how do you really drive the money behind it? And I think it's really trying to tie people together so that we collectively can have this conversation.
Yeah.
In a situation like that, we speaking on politics, who would make that decision to where like it's a historical thing to where now we can't get no money from it?
So the community group controlled that area. So it was singularly the community group, but they were, however they were able to find a way to drive into this community group the idea that this is...
It's the manipulation.
Yeah.
It's just, and we talk about this all the time, where it somehow, and that's how we lose so much generational wealth. Aside from the systematic racism that we're very much aware of
Yes.
in this country, it's also, we just sometimes have misguided information of how to really keep and continue to build that generational wealth. Like you said, that's billions of dollars on a waterfront. What is it now? Is it still a national preservation?
It's in parks land.
Oh my
As you know,
goodness.
getting out of parks is like almost impossible.
Yeah.
You know how you get out of parks? You're like, I found a whole bunch of oil. Right? Back to the money. And then they're like, oh, now we could drill for oil here. Right? It's called Alaska and a lot of different places, Native American land, right? Oil gets you out of parks. But you can't, it's really difficult to get it out of national park land. So, but for our people and for black people, it's like, guys, we don't run from the money. And I think it's kind of a shame, because it's almost like we don't have the ability to really understand how to leverage the money the same way as we should. And we don't necessarily fully trust each other. So it's like, well, I'm going to rather trust someone else to tell me this story. And then you end up in Parks Department land. And you're like, oh my gosh, like, how did that just happen? Where we could have had amazing opportunity, right? Just think about the community who was forced to swim there, who then some people definitely drowned there, right? Because it was very tumultuous, or a shark attack, right? It wasn't a nice place to swim, but it would have been beautiful to go sea, be in a condo, unobstructed views, you name it. And now it's in parkland. Like, even if you didn't do a high-rise building, what are they selling? Like, I listened to a podcast just the other day, and there was a guy in Miami, I forget his name. He said, his parents bought this property in Miami for $100,000 it was like the 50s or something. He was like, we just got it appraised for $53 million. Yeah. Welcome to your wealth, right? That's what we need to start to do, which is don't just give it up. Like, don't give it up to your niece. Like, everyone needs to understand how the money works. And that's how in Poppleton, we're able to drive the house values from $1,000 to $275,000 and more. So we've signed deals with like NVR, which is the 4th largest home builder in the country, backed by Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway. They're on the stock exchange for they're like $27 billion in market cap. So we now are bringing in single family home ownership, which the whole idea is we'll put people in rental, because now we have to change it from the wire. How do you change from something that's that violent to something where people want to be? So rental buildings rule. Rental buildings, and then talk about society. You have to change it, not so it's rental buildings where it's brick, because all the drug dealers are used to standing next to brick. So if you build brick, they'll stand next to yours.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, super glassy, super rain screen, throw cameras up, transform how it looks, gyms, swimming pools, and transform how all of it functions. They don't want to be there in terms of selling drugs there. They're like, wow, my community has actually changed. Yeah.
But this is a very, very interesting point.
Yeah.
One time I heard somebody say, well, I'm going to get into gentrification.
Yep.
I'm very curious about how you feel about this. You can't gentrify a community if there's 100% home ownership, because their property value is just going to go up. You only can really gentrify is rentals. But in this case, and we talk about this, we're especially in our communities, for instance, like Wine Dance, right, has a strong history, and there's a lot of economic development going on. And how do you kind of build up a community internally without losing its history, its essence, its traditions? So if you're building, let's say, a very, very beautiful structure in somewhere in like Poppleton, how can you maintain the essence but also lose some of the past violence and the things that are negative without gentrifying the area? Or I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that, gentrification?
So it's like eminent domain gentrification. A lot of people have instantaneous knee-jerk reactions like, oh, that's bad. It's not really bad all the way through. The one that leaves has a right to come back. So you can't gentrify if you have a right to come back.
Got it.
Right? Additionally to that, when you look at you do have to relocate and move people to build new things. So when you look at the neighborhood, it was like the internal collapse buildings. It was filled with, illicit activity. And this hasn't not just our Baltimore deal, but this is whether it was our Harlem deal, our Hempstead deal, this neighborhoods that we've gone into, this is the same conversation over and over again.
Yeah.
But you have to relocate people to build something new. You can't build them with them in it. So to gentrify, there are different ways to do it.
Got it.
I think that there's a proper way that you can do it, and there's an improper.
Is your development in this specific area, is it affordable? Is it a mix?
Great question.
Yeah. Is it market?
So and I think that's part of the problem, that when in our neighborhoods, they're like gentrification, they're bringing in all the rich people. You want them. You want them because now they have disposable income. That means your grocery store shows up. It means your hair salon will be back. It means you need disposable income. And in blending, and what we do is we blend market rate and affordable together.
Okay. Wow.
Everyone gets to enter through the same door. Everyone is built the same. So everyone has granite in their apartments. Everyone has garbage disposals. Even down to the technology. It was really important for us to really get into the social aspect of humans, right? For this whole entire thing. And social, it was like, okay, so how do we make people feel comfortable in a large high-rise building where they're used to being scared, even being outside. So now the police can't even see you. So it wasn't just the cameras, like as in the rolling cameras, but all of our doorknobs, we picked up a company called Latch. And Latch is going through some repositioning right now, but they still function where your doorknobs take photos. If you fail to enter, it'll take a photo. If you mess with it, it takes a photo. And then if you start to look at every door going down, you have an amazing amount of coverage. So people start to feel comfortable. Then it wasn't just about the safety for comfort. It's like, oh, but now think about on these 20%, for you to get a better job, a better raise, you have to work longer hours, but you're worried that your kids are horsing around. So now upload Latch. You're like, oh, why did John and Joey leave the house or enter the house 5 times? I have photos. What were you kids doing? I thought you were supposed to study. Your dog walker is supposed to walk your dog for an hour. 15 minutes later, and they never re-enter. Why am I paying you for an hour when you walk the dog in 15 minutes? Right? So society is, you're trying to fix societal problems over and over again. And I think it's really important to fix them when you're doing real estate deals, because then that's how you change society. And you have to drive policy, right?
Yeah.
The policy of it is now, it's not going to be the same as 1975 when they wrote the urban renewal ordinance. They're going to change because it's totally different circumstances, which are for the good. So 20% is affordable.
Got it. Okay.
80% is market.
Got it.
And now when you start to think about even that, in the 80%, you have people whose families runs the biggest law firm in the city. You guys are the affordable. But kids don't know that. So now your best friend, his kids become his father who's running the law firm. You are in the affordable, whatever that means, right? Whatever that station of life is. But now you have an opportunity to shoot the moon, which means I now understand why he studies more. I understand what it means to go to law school.
Got it,
I can get an internship.
Yeah.
And it's not just law. It's every single aspect of big business that you never saw before, because everyone in your former life was 100% affordable. So everyone was some station that was almost identical. So there's no light at the end of the tunnel that gives you the opportunity to say, this is why I need to do something different. I want to be more. I want to do better. Here it is. Here's the way I shoot the moon.
Got it.
So
I have one more question. I'm not sure if you want to jump in with anything, but I was very curious. And that's, you mentioned before taxes, sales tax. And that's a huge component to not only public schools, but also how a local government funds itself.
Yeah.
The sales tax.
Absolutely.
And you can see a lot of times when we talk about economic development that you can't get a certain supermarket or even Starbucks because it depends on the income of that zip code.
Yep.
Or the sales tax of that area. So that's very important when we talk about economic development.
Yeah.
And the whole cycle of it. For those that might be interested in being a developer, can you just break down, not too deep, but in a way, what would be the structure of that type of financing? I know a lot of times it's 80% private lending and then 80% public lending and then 20% private raise. So how does that work, that type of structure?
You know, there's no structure that's identical. We've never built anything that matched identical. Because, right, you can end up with grant money based on the municipality, based on the year, right? There's more grant money in our system if we're not at war. So you have to figure out, okay, so if there's no grant money there, how do I get grant money? Does the state have grant money? Does the city have grant money? If they don't have grant money, how do I reduce cost? And is it possible for me to leverage more? Maybe not. So then you go to like tax credits. So you're like, okay, so if I do an 80-20 deal, right? Yeah. I'm going to do a volume cap transaction. We only build 4%, so that's as of right based on state population. 9% are competitive. I don't like nines for a myriad of reasons, but it'll take too long, and we'll do another podcast around why I don't. But the 4% are automatic per population, and you could sell the tax credits to J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo. Even Berkshire Hathaway has a whole division to buy. I think Microsoft has a division to buy tax credits, because they're offsetting their own income with tax credits by doing good. And what I love about that program is they are then taking money, which they're buying your tax credits, which gives you equity into the deal. So you just close your gap, right? So you close your gap to build affordable housing. So yeah, they might get a write-off and a benefit, but you ended up with a huge benefit. So this community actually starts to thrive now. So there's a lot that goes along with how and why, the structure is just so dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's learning all of that.
We only have a few minutes left, but would you, if someone says, I want to be a real estate developer, has no property, doesn't really have much cash flow either, do you think it's wise for someone to get into this industry right now with the interest rates in the state and how costly land is?
So, no, I don't. I think that you would be in a place where you would set yourself up for failure to just jump in. You should, and this is how, and I didn't just jump in to real estate development. I went and learned technically through someone else, right? So New York Equity Fund was my vehicle, which was under LISC. So LISC is a really large not-for-profit that has a massive amount of social want to redevelop neighborhoods that look like ours. And then they created New York Equity Fund, which is part of it. National Equity Fund, all that stuff is like LISC driven. And I learned what it was to be a financier, because you have to understand the money.
Yeah.
You have to understand the gaps, right? To go in and just start to develop like from scratch. You don't know what's coming for you, like the contractor hiccups, the people that steal things off of construction. Like you think it's going to be good, like all good. And if you don't have tons of disposable cash to throw in because you took hits along the way, then it's a horrible scenario and you possibly lose, whether it's your family savings or your life savings. So I would say start with a big company so that you could learn, because this is the way I did it. I learned a ton. And then we peeled ourselves out because we learned a ton. And then there's so much more learning that happens to go along with you understanding now accounting, you understanding legal, you understanding the change in legislation. Like we have at least a half dozen pieces of legislation we created alone because we had to legislate our entitlements, legislate our TIF, which is our tax increment financing. You name it. So you're constantly on a learning pattern in real estate, but just to dive in and pretend, like I'm almost happy because being younger, you just automatically, like, I could do this. I'm glad that God was like, slow down.
Yeah.
Learn this. Here it is, New York City deal, Harlem. It's like, here are your 9 buildings and you make them into condos. So now you technically have 18 units. So we built that. And the contractors are your first line of dealing with the craziness of theft. And they're like, well, we're just not going to build that. Oh, but I have a bond. The bonding company actually only listens to the contractor. So it means pony up more money to go sue somebody or work it out. Like, it's amazing how many people don't come to your rescue.
We understand. There's a lot that we can, and we'll definitely have you on as a guest if you're willing to come to really talk more in the depth about the development industry. But just real quickly, how many properties are under the Cité right now? How many do you have?
So in Baltimore, we had 528 in total. So that's the 14 acres there that we're building out. We have Hempstead, which we still have.
We didn't get into Hempstead today.
Where you developing Hempstead at?
So we're 479 Front Street. So okay. Front Street and Attorney Street. So Attorney Street is really 1 block long, but it was really challenged by 4 houses that were vacant, dilapidated, lots of drug dealing, yet again, lots of illicit things. So it was amazing to watch the community come like, we don't want this building. There's no parking already. Like, because the drug dealers
and you'd be surprised because we was doing some community outreach for Opportunities Long Island, and we went down to the terrace buildings down there. Yeah. And they trying to like change the landscape of those buildings. I see there's no more brick there. It's like the what was that?
They had glass.
Yeah, they had like glass.
And rain screen, terracotta rain screen, something. Yeah. But Hempstead, so we did this deal 10 years ago. And we still own it. And it was interesting because...
And that's 3 mayors ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was, but it was during the era where people come from other communities. They're like, oh, you shouldn't want pilots. This is terrible. It's like, the buildings can't afford to pay full taxes based on their valuation. So what we said to everyone was, look, at our pilot, we're going to pay what we're paying for all 4 buildings that don't pay taxes now because they're dilapidated. We'll pay what that would generate if it was a regular building.
But real quick, again, this is policy and culture. So this is a great policy education. I know what a
100%.
pilot is.
Oh,
but
payment
it's
in lieu of
payment in lieu of
taxes.
taxes.
Yeah.
That's
And
like a program, right?
it's a way for developers in general, if you're doing any type of, especially housing development, to be able to develop and then also offset cost. Because it is still a business at the end of the day. And so sometimes those pilot agreements, though, can go for 20 to 30 years.
Correct.
And then the developer's not paying the amount of tax that would normally be paid because of the cost to develop it. But after 30 years, then the community starts getting some of the benefits. It's just not as much.
So we paid taxes the entire time. We didn't do a zero pilot.
You didn't? Okay.
We started with what the 4 buildings would have paid if they were functional and paying. This way, there was always money going into the coffers. Then it scales up from there, and we're 20. I think we're a 30-year pilot. We're either 20 or 30. So actually, I think we're 30 because we have 20 years left. So, but the whole idea of the pilot is so that you could leverage more at the banking side, so that you can afford the transaction. But in Hempstead, it was so contentious, and not technically by the people in Hempstead. People came from different areas, whether it was like Garden City people, and then you ended up with like Rockville Center people. Like, but why should their voice matter? You're not even from Hempstead. This is Hempstead's pilot, not the town of Hempstead. This is the village of Hempstead's pilot. Why are you in talking about something that actually doesn't affect you at all? And this is a part I would love for your show to like really focus on how other people who have nothing to do with, back to like the reason why I mentioned Miami, right? Those people weren't from that portion of the neighborhood. Weren't their families that were forced to swim there, but yet someone
Convinced
them to put that into parkland, very similar to the people in Hempstead being told, well, you shouldn't like pilots, but yet you live in Garden City or Rockville Center, things that are already stabilized communities. Why are you over here trying to not allow stabilization to happen? So it's a really interesting portion of, and I think a huge learning portion for your audience to start to think through why should we do this? Like, this is actually great for us. So our building is 29 units on Front and Attorney Street. It's a sorry about that. It's a really amazing project. So we built it as 80-20 as well. So
80 market, 20 affordable?
Yeah. And
what's the AMI out in affordable?
50 and 60%.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That is
so
that's great,
there are a lot of people that really, once again, we're able to pull out of historically just like tumultuous situations, and or seniors. When you think about seniors on fixed incomes, they're stuck and everything just increases, your gas, your food, all of that. And they don't have anywhere to go. It's not like the government increases their benefits based on inflation and the cost of inflated food and gas. They're stuck. So it was really helpful. There's a gentleman, you guys might know, Henry Holly, who lives in our building. But he used to work with my grandfather. So he's known my family for 3 generations. I'm the 3rd generation. So as a senior, he lives in our building. So it's been great to be able to kind of go back home. My grandfather owned one of the largest funeral homes. It was the Bythewood Funeral Home, for your listeners. So there's
so you had a funeral home, you got a dental,
and then now we do real estate.
There you go.
We definitely got to get Dan back on that. That episode got to be on really like community pride and stuff like that. Just like we can't keep giving our resources away like that.
Wealth.
Generational wealth, absolutely.
So Dan, it's an honor to be able to get to know you more, get to connect with you, another Long Island native that's doing national and international work. But we like to end off having a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
It's policy and culture. So we're going to throw a few questions at you, and you got to pick one.
Okay.
So first, I think it'd be cool to Formula One or real estate.
Formula One.
Formula One. Okay. Sag Harbor or the Hamptons?
Technically one and the same, because Sag Harbor is within the Hamptons, but Sag Harbor is where the heart is, and where my family's come from. So Sag Harbor.
There we go. Okay. Now you're an 80s baby, I would assume, right? You said 75.
74. I was born.
Okay. So you're gonna do Mike, Jack, or Prince?
Ooh, that's brutal. Why did you go there?
Yeah, I feel like I know which one you're gonna pick too. Who do you think he's gonna pick?
I think he gonna go Mike Jack.
I think you go Prince.
I think he gonna go Mike Jack.
So I'm on Mike Jack.
Oh,
man.
really? Okay.
He's somebody that respects the process. Michael Jackson put in a lot of work to be the greatest, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Well,
As
the
much as-
Wall was in the 70s though, so right, what was that 77?
Yeah. Look, there's nothing wrong with either of them. It's like they're both amazing, right? And I could have easily gone Prince too for somebody who could play every instrument, right? It's just that his amount of musical talent was through the roof. Michael's like for different reasons, and I think that there's different struggles between the two of them.
Got it. Okay.
So it's very complex reason for why you should decide to choose one or the other. But yeah, really hard.
All right. That's fair.
But Jordan, not LeBron.
Jordan, here we go. Okay, here we go. We'll wrap with that, the OG. Dan, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
guys.
Thank you.
Dan.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Absolutely.